The rain was relentless, hammering Seattle's cobblestone streets, but inside the tiny flower shop, the air was warm, fragrant with roses and eucalyptus. Elias Torres, 32, stood behind the counter, his hands deftly arranging lilies, his dark eyes flickering with a secret that burned brighter than the shop's dim lights. Nobody in this city, not the customers, not the neighbors, not even his closest friends, knew the truth about him and Julian Harper, the man who just walked in, shaking rain from his auburn hair. "Eli, you're gonna flood the place with all this romance," Julian teased, his voice low, playful, as he leaned against the counter. At 35, Julian's easy charm and sharp wit made him the kind of man who could light up a room or break a heart without trying. But Elias knew the softer side, the one that whispered promises in the dark, the one that had kept their love hidden for 12 years. "Keep it down, Jules," Elias murmured, glancing toward the shop's open door. "You know how this town talks." Seattle's Fremont neighborhood was tight-knit, a kaleidoscope of artists, tech workers, and old hippies, but it wasn't ready for their story. Not yet. They'd built a life in the shadows, stolen glances, coded texts, a marriage certificate tucked away in a locked drawer. To the world, Elias was just the florist, and Julian was the charismatic lawyer who stopped by for bouquets. But tonight, everything was about to change. The bell above the door chimed, and a woman in her late 50s, with silver-streaked hair and a no-nonsense stride, marched in. Margaret Maggie Callahan, Julian's mother, was a force of nature, head of the city's biggest community center and a vocal advocate for progressive causes. She adored Elias, always praising his floral arrangements for her events, but she had no idea he was her son-in-law. "Elias, darling, I need something spectacular for the gala tomorrow," Maggie said, her voice warm but commanding. "It's the biggest fundraiser of the year, LGBTQ youth programs. Julian's giving the keynote, of course." She shot her son a proud smile, oblivious to the way Elias's fingers tightened around a stem. "Got it, Maggie," Elias said, his voice steady despite the storm in his chest. "Roses and dahlias, bold but heartfelt? Perfect. You always know what I need." She patted his hand, then turned to Julian. "And you, don't be late tomorrow. This speech is your moment." Julian's smile was tight. "Wouldn't miss it, Mom." As Maggie left, the air grew heavy. Tomorrow's gala wasn't just a fundraiser. It was the night Julian had promised to come out, to tell the world about their marriage. Elias had agreed, but the weight of it pressed against his ribs. 12 years of secrecy had kept them safe, but it had also kept them apart. Could they survive the spotlight? That night, in their small apartment above the shop, Elias sat on the couch, staring at the rain-streaked window. Julian knelt before him, taking his hands. "Eli, I know you're scared. I am too. But I can't keep pretending you're just my friend. Not anymore." Elias's eyes stung. "What if they hate us, Jules? Your mom, your sister, your clients. What if this breaks everything? Then we rebuild. Together." Julian's voice was fierce, his grip unyielding. "I love you, Elias Torres. I've loved you since that rainy night in Portland when you gave me a half-dead daisy and said it matched my vibe." Elias laughed, despite himself. "It was a terrible daisy. It was perfect." Julian kissed his knuckles, and for a moment the world felt small, just the two of them. But the world wasn't small. It was loud, judgmental, and waiting. The gala was at the Chihuly Garden and Glass, a glittering venue of glass sculptures and shimmering lights. Elias spent the next day preparing the floral arrangements. Hundreds of roses, dahlias, and peonies, each petal a piece of his heart. He worked alone, the shop quiet except for the hum of his thoughts. What would Maggie say when she learned the truth? Would she see Elias differently, not as the kind florist but as the man who'd married her son in secret? By evening, Elias arrived at the venue. His suit crisp but his nerves frayed. The crowd was a mix of Seattle's elite and grassroots activists, all gathered to support a cause that hit too close to home. Julian, in a tailored charcoal suit, stood at the podium, his presence commanding. Elias lingered at the back, arranging a final centerpiece, his heart pounding as Julian began his speech. "Ladies and gentlemen," Julian's voice rang out, clear and steady. "Tonight is about courage, about living your truth no matter the cost. I stand here as a gay man, proud and unapologetic, but I haven't always been honest about my story." The room went silent. Elias's breath caught. This was it. Julian's eyes found Elias across the room. "For 12 years, I've loved someone fiercely, someone who's been my home through every storm. And I've kept him a secret, not because I'm ashamed, but because I was afraid. Afraid of losing the people I love, afraid of the world's judgment. But tonight, I'm done hiding." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Maggie, seated near the front, frowned, her hands clasped tightly. Elias felt his throat close. He wanted to run, to pull Julian off that stage, but his feet were rooted to the floor. "I'm married," Julian said, his voice breaking slightly, "to the man who made every flower in this room bloom. Elias Torres, my husband, my heart, my everything." The room erupted. Gasps, whispers, a few scattered claps. Maggie's face went pale, her eyes darting to Elias. He couldn't read her expression. Shock, betrayal, or something softer. Before he could process it, a voice cut through the noise. "Julian Harper, you absolute fool." It was Lena, Julian's younger sister, 28, with her fiery red hair and sharper tongue. She stood, her chair scraping the floor. "You got married without telling me? And to Elias, my favorite florist." The crowd laughed, some nervously, and the tension broke like a wave. Lena stormed toward Elias, but her grin was wide. "You're in so much trouble, brother-in-law." Elias managed a shaky smile, but his eyes were on Maggie, who hadn't moved. Julian stepped down from the podium, weaving through the crowd to reach Elias. He took his hand, unapologetic, and pulled him close. "I'm sorry I kept you waiting," he whispered. The gala continued, but the air had shifted. Some guests approached with congratulations, others with cautious smiles. Maggie remained seated, her silence louder than the chatter. As the night wound down, Elias found her by a glass sculpture, her expression unreadable. "Elias," she said softly, "why didn't you tell me?" He swallowed hard. "We wanted to, Maggie, but we didn't know how. We were scared you'd think less of you." She shook her head, tears glinting in her eyes. "You're family. You've always been family." The words hit Elias like a tidal wave. He hugged her, and for the first time in years he felt the weight of secrecy lift. But the night wasn't over. There was one more speech to give, one only Elias could deliver. As the gala neared its close, Elias took the stage, his hands trembling but his voice steady. "I'm not a lawyer or a speaker," he began, "just a florist who loves a man more than words can say. For 12 years we hid because we thought the world wouldn't understand. But tonight, I see you, friends, family, strangers, who've shown us that love doesn't need to hide. It just needs to bloom." The crowd rose, applause thundering through the room. Julian joined him, their hands clasped, and for the first time, they stood together, unhidden, unbroken. The morning after the gala, Elias woke to the scent of coffee and the soft clink of mugs in their apartment. Julian was in the kitchen, humming off-key, his hair still mussed from sleep. The world felt different now, brighter, but also unsteady, like a boat rocking on new waters. Last night's revelation had cracked their lives open, And while the applause still echoed in Elias's ears, so did Maggie's quiet tears and Lena's fiery questions. "Morning, husband," Julian said, sliding a mug across the counter. His smile was warm, but his eyes held a flicker of worry. "You okay after last night?" Elias sipped the coffee, letting the bitterness ground him. "I don't know, Jules. It was a lot. Your mom. She didn't say much after that hug." Julian nodded, his fingers tracing the rim of his mug. "She'll come around. She always does. Lena, though? She's probably planning our second wedding already." Elias chuckled, but his chest tightened. The gala had been a victory, but it was only the beginning. Seattle might be progressive, but it wasn't a bubble. Julian's law firm, a corporate giant with conservative clients, wasn't thrilled about personal distractions. And Elias's shop, his sanctuary, was now a stage for curious neighbors and whispered gossip. By noon, the flower shop was buzzing, not with customers, but with questions. Mrs. Nguyen, the 70-year-old baker from next door, poked her head in. "Elias, is it true? You and that lawyer boy?" Her tone was kind but probing, her eyes sharp with curiosity. "Yeah, Mrs. N," Elias said, forcing a smile as he trimmed a rose. "Julian and I were married." She clapped her hands, delighted. "Good for you. But why keep it secret? Love like that, you shout it." Elias's smile faltered. "It's complicated." She patted his arm. "Life always is. You keep those flowers pretty. Okay?" The day wore on, and the shop filled with familiar faces. Some supportive, some skeptical. A tech bro in his 20s, a regular who always bought tulips for his girlfriend, hesitated before asking, "So you're, like, gay?" "No offense, just didn't see it coming." Elias nodded, keeping his response short, but each question chipped away at his calm. That evening, Julian's phone buzzed with a text from his boss, Victor Callahan, no relation to Maggie, but a man whose name carried weight in Seattle's legal circles. The message was curt: "We need to talk. Monday. My office." Julian's face darkened as he showed it to Elias. "They're not happy," Julian said, tossing the phone onto the couch. "Victor's old school. He thinks my personal life could scare off clients." Elias's stomach churned. "What does that mean for you? For us?" "It means I fight," Julian said, his jaw set. "I'm not losing you or my career. We've hidden too long to let some suit dictate our future." But doubt crept in. Elias lay awake that night, Julian's arm heavy across his chest, wondering if love could withstand the world's sharp edges. The next day, Maggie invited them to her house in Capitol Hill, a craftsman-style home filled with books and family photos. Lena was there too, sprawled on the couch with a glass of wine, her energy as chaotic as ever. "So," Lena began, pointing at them with her glass, "when were you going to tell me I had a brother-in-law? I mean, Elias, you've been arranging flowers for my birthdays for years." Elias flushed. "We didn't want to hurt anyone. It just snowballed." Maggie, sitting across from them, was quieter. "I wish you'd trusted me," she said finally. "I've spent my life fighting for people to be themselves. Did you think I wouldn't fight for you?" Julian reached for her hand. "Mom, it wasn't about you. It was about us, about me. I wasn't ready to face the world. But I am now." Maggie's eyes softened, but there was still a distance there, a hurt that hadn't fully healed. The conversation shifted to lighter things. Lena's latest art project, Maggie's plans for the community center. But Elias felt the unspoken questions lingering. Over the next week, the fallout from the gala rippled. Julian's firm scheduled a strategy meeting to discuss his public image. Elias overheard whispers at the shop. Some kind, some cruel. A local blog posted about their marriage, calling it Seattle's secret love story. But the comments section was a minefield of support and vitriol. Elias tried to focus on his work, but every bouquet felt like a confession, every petal a risk. One afternoon, a stranger entered the shop, a man in his 40s with a sharp suit and sharper eyes. "You're Elias Torres?" he asked, his tone clipped. "Yeah," Elias said, wiping his hands on his apron. "Can I help you?" "I'm David Reese, a friend of Victor Callahan. I represent some of Julian's biggest clients. We're concerned about his recent choices." Elias's heart sank. His choices? David leaned closer, his voice low. "Julian's a talented lawyer, but his personal life is becoming a liability. I'm here to ask you, man to man, think about what's best for him. For both of you." The words hit like a punch. Elias wanted to scream, to throw David out, but he stood frozen, his hands trembling. "You don't know us," he managed. "I know business," David said, leaving a card on the counter. "Think about it." That night, Elias told Julian everything. They sat on their apartment floor, surrounded by half-finished bouquets, the air thick with tension. "He's trying to scare us," Julian said, his voice hard. "They think they can push you out of my life." "But what if he's right?" Elias's voice cracked. "What if I'm holding you back? Your career, your family." "Stop." Julian cupped Elias's face, his eyes fierce. "You are my family. My career means nothing if I lose you." Elias wanted to believe him, but fear was a heavy thing. The next day, he found himself at the community center, helping Maggie set up for a youth event. She watched him closely, her hands busy with flyers. "You're quieter than usual," she said. "Just thinking," Elias admitted, "about what this means for Julian, for us." Maggie set the flyers down, her expression soft but firm. "Love isn't a burden, Elias. It's a gift. And you too, you're stronger than you think." Her words stayed with him, but so did David's card, burning a hole in his pocket. The world was watching, and Elias wasn't sure he was ready for its gaze. The shop was quiet, save for the soft snip of Elias's shears as he shaped a bouquet of peonies. It was a week since David's visit, and the man's words clung to him like damp air. Julian had thrown himself into work, preparing for his meeting with Victor, but Elias could see the strain in his husband's eyes, the late nights, the forced smiles. Their love, once a private sanctuary, was now a public battleground. Outside, Fremont was alive with its usual chaos: street musicians, coffee shop debates, the hum of a city that prided itself on openness. But Elias felt exposed, like a flower stripped of its petals. He kept David's card hidden in a drawer, but its presence haunted him. Was he selfish for wanting Julian to stay true to their love, even if it cost him everything? That afternoon, Lena burst into the shop, her energy a whirlwind. "Eli, you're coming to my art show tonight, right? No excuses. Julian's already on board." Elias hesitated. "I don't know, Lena. Things are complicated." She rolled her eyes. "Complicated is my middle name. Your family now, officially. You don't get to hide anymore." Her words, meant as a tease, stung. Hiding had been their shield, but now it was gone. Still, Elias agreed, if only to escape his thoughts. That evening, he and Julian arrived at a gritty Belltown gallery, its walls lined with Lena's vibrant paintings, bold slashes of color depicting love, loss, and rebellion. The crowd was eclectic, a mix of hipsters and art critics, all buzzing with wine and opinions. Lena dragged them to her centerpiece, a massive canvas of two figures embracing under a stormy sky. "This is you guys," she said, grinning. "I painted it after the gala. Love in the chaos." Elias stared, his throat tight. The figures were abstract, but their connection was unmistakable. Hands clasped, bodies leaning into each other, defiant against the storm. Julian squeezed his hand, his voice low. She gets us. The night was a blur of compliments and small talk, but Elias felt the weight of eyes on them. A few guests whispered, their glances sharp. Julian, ever the charmer, deflected with jokes, but Elias saw the tension in his jaw. When they stepped outside for air, the cool night hit like a bomb. "You okay?" Julian asked, his breath visible in the chilly air. "Are you?" Elias countered. "You're meeting with Victor's tomorrow. What if?" Julian cut him off with a kiss, fierce and grounding. "Whatever happens, we face it together. Promise me you won't let that creep David get in your head." Elias nodded, but the promise felt fragile. The next morning, Julian left for the firm, his suit impeccable but his eyes tired. Elias stayed at the shop, trying to lose himself in work, but every customer's glance felt like a judgment. By noon, his phone buzzed with a text from Julian. "It's bad. Call you soon." Panic clawed at Elias's chest. He closed the shop early and paced their apartment, waiting for Julian's call. When it came, Julian's voice was tight. "Victor gave me an ultimatum. Tone down the public displays or I'm out. They're worried about losing clients." Elias's heart sank. "What did you say?" "I told him to shove it," Julian said, a bitter laugh in his voice. "But it's not that simple. They're putting me on a performance review. If I lose this job, Eli, we're screwed financially." The words hung between them. Elias thought of the shop, barely breaking even, and their apartment, cozy but modest. "We'll figure it out," he said, but his voice wavered. That night they sat in silence, the weight of the world pressing in. Julian broke it first. "I'm not giving you up, Eli. Not for them, not for anyone. But what if it's too much?" Elias whispered. "What if we lose everything?" Julian pulled him close, his voice fierce. "Then we start over. We've done it before." The next day, Elias found himself at the community center again, helping Maggie with a youth mentorship program. The kids, aged 14 to 18, were a mix of shy and bold, their stories raw and real. One boy, Jamal, 16, with a quiet voice and sharp eyes, lingered after the session. "I heard about you and Julian," he said. "You're like married and stuff. That's cool." Elias smiled, surprised. "Thanks. It's not always easy, though." Jamal shrugged. "Yeah, but you're out there. That's what matters. Gives me hope, you know?" The words hit Elias hard. He'd been so focused on their struggles, he hadn't considered what their story meant to others. That night, he told Julian about Jamal, and for the first time in days, they laughed, imagining a world where kids like Jamal could love freely. But the reprieve was short. The next morning, a letter arrived at the shop, addressed to Elias. It was from David Reese, offering a private meeting to discuss options for Julian's career. The implication was clear. Step back or Julian would pay the price. Elias's hands shook as he read it, the words blurring through tears. He loved Julian more than anything, but was love enough to fight a world that wanted them apart? Elias stared at the letter, its crisp edges mocking him. David's words were polite but razor-sharp, a thinly veiled threat dressed in corporate jargon. He shoved it into a drawer, but it lingered in his mind, a poison seeping into every thought. Julian was at the firm, fighting to keep his job, while Elias was here, arranging flowers, feeling powerless. The shop, once his haven, now felt like a cage. He tried to focus on a wedding order, white roses and lavender for a couple he'd never met, but his hands trembled, snapping a stem. The bell chimed, and Maggie walked in, her expression softer than it had been since the gala. "Elias, you look like you've seen a ghost," she said, setting a coffee cup on the counter. "Just a long day," he lied, forcing a smile. Maggie raised an eyebrow. Don't bullshit me, kid. I've known you too long. Elias hesitated, then pulled out David's letter. Maggie read it in silence, her jaw tightening. This man thinks he can bully my family? She said, her voice low but fierce. He's got another thing coming. Elias blinked, surprised by her fire. Maggie, it's not just him. It's the firm, the clients. Julian could lose everything because of me. Bullshit, she said again, softer this time. Julian's fighting for you because you're worth it. Don't let some suit make you doubt that. Her words were a lifeline, but Elias's fear ran deep. That night, he and Julian sat on their balcony, the Seattle skyline glittering in the distance. Julian looked exhausted, his tie loosened, his eyes distant. They're watching every move I make, he said. Every email, every meeting. It's like they're waiting for me to slip. Elias took his hand, his voice quiet. Jules, what if we stepped back, just for a while, to protect you? Julian's eyes flashed. No, we're not going backward. Not after everything. But your job. My job isn't my life. You are. Julian's voice broke, and he pulled Elias into a fierce hug. We're in this together, Eli. Always. The next day, Elias threw himself into work, trying to drown out his doubts. But the shop was a revolving door of opinions. Supportive neighbors, curious strangers, and one angry customer who muttered about flaunting lifestyles. Elias kept his head down, but each word stung. By afternoon, he was drained, until Jamal, the teen from the community center, stopped by. Yo, Elias, you got any cheap flowers? I want to ask someone out, Jamal said, his grin shy but hopeful. Elias smiled, handing him a single sunflower. On the house. Who's the lucky person? Jamal blushed. This guy, Marcus. He's in my art class. I'm kind of freaking out. Elias's heart swelled. You'll do great. Just be you. Jamal's visit was a reminder of why they'd come out, why their story mattered. But the reminder came with a cost. That evening, a brick crashed through the shop's window, shattering glass and Elias's fragile calm. Scrawled on it in marker was a single word. Freak. Julian was there in minutes, his face pale as he helped Elias clean up. The police came, took a report, and left with promises to look into it. But the damage was done. Elias stood among the broken glass, his hands shaking. This is what I was afraid of, he whispered. Julian pulled him close. This isn't your fault. It's theirs, the ones too scared to face their own hate. The next day, Maggie and Lena showed up with brooms and plywood, their faces set with determination. Nobody messes with our boys, Lena said, hammering a board into place. Maggie organized a neighborhood watch, rallying Fremont's quirky community to stand guard. By evening, the shop was patched up, and a crowd of neighbors had gathered, bringing food, flowers, and handwritten notes of support. Elias was overwhelmed, tears prickling his eyes. I didn't expect this, he admitted to Maggie. People surprise you, she said. Give them a chance. But the brick was only the beginning. At the firm, Julian faced new pressure. Clients pulling out, meetings canceled. Victor called him in again, his tone icy. You're a liability, Harper. Fix this or you're done. Julian came home that night, his fight fading. I don't know how much longer I can do this, he admitted, his voice raw. Maybe they're right. Maybe I'm dragging you down with me. Elias's heart broke. He wanted to fight, to tell Julian they'd survive. But the fear was suffocating. That night, he lay awake, David's letter burning in his mind. Was love worth this pain? Or was it time to let go, to save the man he loved? The shop was dark, the plywood over the broken window casting shadows across the floor. Elias sat among his flowers, the scent of lilies heavy in the air. It was past midnight, and Julian was asleep upstairs, unaware that Elias held David's letter again. Its words like a blade. Think about what's best for him. He'd spent 12 years building a life with Julian, but now, every choice felt like a gamble with their future. The next morning, Elias made a decision. He slipped out before Julian woke, leaving a note. Need some air. Back soon. He drove to Alki Beach, the gray waves crashing against the shore. The cold bit at his skin, but he needed clarity. He loved Julian fiercely, but love wasn't enough if it destroyed him. David's offer, a quiet exit, a chance for Julian to save his career, tempted him in a way he hated to admit. By noon, he was back at the shop, his resolve shaky but intact. Julian was waiting, his eyes red-rimmed. "Where were you?" he asked, his voice tight. "I thought you left." Elias's heart cracked. "I'd never leave you, Jules. I just needed to think." "About what?" Julian's voice was sharp, scared. "About giving up? Because that's what it feels like." Elias took a breath, the truth spilling out. "David wants me to step back, to let you go for your career. And I'm scared, Jules. Scared that I'm ruining your life." Julian's face softened, and he pulled Elias into his arms. "You're not ruining anything. You're the reason I'm still standing." They held each other, the world quiet for a moment. But the fight wasn't over. That afternoon, Maggie called, her voice urgent. "The community center's hosting a rally tomorrow. For you, for Julian, for everyone who's been hurt by hate. We need you there." Elias hesitated, but Julian nodded. "We'll be there." The rally was held in Fremont Park, under a sky heavy with clouds. Hundreds gathered. Neighbors, activists, kids from the youth program, even Mrs. Nguyen with a tray of pastries. Maggie stood at a makeshift podium, her voice ringing out. "This is about love, about standing up to fear. My son and his husband are proof that love wins. Every time." Elias felt tears prick his eyes as the crowd cheered. Jamal was there, holding Marcus's hand, his smile bright. Lena painted a mural on the spot, vibrant colors spelling out, "Love is loud." But not everyone was supportive. A small group of protesters stood at the edge, their signs cruel, their voices loud. Elias's stomach twisted, but Julian squeezed his hand. "We've got this." When it was Julian's turn to speak, he took the stage, his presence steady. "I almost lost everything," he said, his voice clear. "My job, my family, my heart. But standing here with all of you, I know we're not alone. Love isn't just a feeling, it's a fight. And I'm fighting for my husband, Elias Torres." The crowd roared, but Elias's eyes were on Maggie, who was crying openly now. When Julian stepped down, she hugged them both, her voice fierce. "I'm so proud of you." That night, the shop was quiet again, but the air felt lighter. Julian's firm hadn't fired him yet, but they'd reached a stalemate. The community's support had shifted something, though. Clients who'd wavered came back, moved by Julian's honesty. The shop saw new customers, drawn by the rally's buzz. Even David Reese sent a curt email backing off. As the weeks passed, Elias and Julian rebuilt, piece by piece. The shop's window was replaced, the scars of hate covered by fresh paint. They hosted a community event, inviting Jamal and Marcus to help with a youth art project. Lena's mural became a local landmark, a symbol of resilience. On a quiet evening, Elias stood at the shop's counter, arranging a bouquet for a new client, a young man buying flowers for his boyfriend. Julian came up behind him, wrapping his arms around Elias's waist. "You know," Julian said, his voice soft, "I thought the gala was our big moment, but it's this, every day, you and me, building a life." Elias turned, kissing him gently. "You're my home, Jules. Always." The world wasn't perfect. There were still whispers, still threats, still fights to come. But as Elias took the stage at the next community event, his voice steady, He spoke not just for himself, but for everyone who'd ever hidden their heart. They thought I was just the florist, he said, Julian's hand in his. But I'm the man who loves, who fights, who stays. And that's enough. The crowd cheered, and Elias felt it. The weight of fear lifting, the bloom of hope taking root. Love wasn't just a moment. It was a promise, kept every day, no matter the cost.